This is London's best restaurant hummus, and it costs a whopping £9.50, whereas this hummus from the store only costs £1.50. I hate wasting money, but after tasting the creamiest hummus there is, I can't go back to eating the grainy imposter from the store. So what gives? What makes this restaurant's hummus so much better? Well, after cracking the code to perfect homemade hummus a few years ago, we obsessed over making ultra-smooth restaurant-style hummus. What we discovered changes everything. For the price of this one tub, you can make 12 times as much hummus that's as smooth as the premium stuff, and it may be even better. So, the first thing you're going to need to make extra smooth hummus is freshly soaked chickpeas. These are just simply dried chickpeas that I place in a bowl covered with water and I let them sit for about 6 hours. They double in size to end up about this big. There is another way you can shorten this process though if you can't wait 6 hours, and that is to use jarred or canned chickpeas. Now generally, the taste of freshly soaked chickpeas is always better than these canned or jarred ones. However, in a pinch where you don't have the time, these ones work pretty good. Now once your chickpeas are fully soaked, the next thing to do is give them a good rinse under some running water. Doing this will just get rid of any of the dirty water, plus if there's any dirt or anything from when it was packaged, it will get rid of that too. Now rinsing them this way also gives you an opportunity to look through the chickpeas and look for any bad ones. Now once you're happy with them, you could just go ahead and dump them into a tall pot. You want something with a bit of height so that you don't get any spillover. Then the next step is simply to transfer your pot to the stove and then fill it with about 1.5 to 2 litres of water. Set the heat to high and then let this come up to a boil. Now, cooking your chickpeas is not a fun process because it does take a bit of time for them to cook. But the reason why you should do this is because the jarred chickpeas often taste a bit different than the freshly soaked ones. This will give you a better product overall. I'm going to leave this on high heat so that it can come up to a boil. These chickpeas have finally come to a boil and there's a bunch of foam floating to the surface, so I'm going to quickly scoop that all off. Doing that will just give us a cleaner flavour, and I'm just going to scoop out that foam and get rid of as much of it as I can. Now, if you're working with freshly soaked chickpeas, you're going to need to add some baking soda or bicarbonate of soda. What this does is it helps break down the skin so you get a smoother hummus product in the end of the day. This is just about a teaspoon for 500 grams of chickpeas, and you just add that in. Ooh. Now once you do that, it's going to fizz. Just mix it in, give it a good stir. And then once you have given that a good mix to stir in the bicarb, just cover it with a lid and turn the heat to medium. You're just going to leave this to cook for about 1 to 2 hours. See you back here in a few minutes. This has been cooking for an hour now, and the chickpeas are definitely fully cooked. You can see here they've softened. If you take one in your hand and you squish it, it will just break apart. Now, a lot of the time when you serve hummus, you'll want to top it with a few chickpeas just as a bit of a garnish. So if you do want some, set a few aside. A lot of people say that when you make hummus, you want to peel off the skins of the chickpeas, but to be honest, it doesn't do anything to get rid of them. And actually, the skins are an important part of the texture. So just keep cooking it down and you'll end up with a way smoother texture by just cooking them into a complete mush. It has been another half an hour since I checked in on this, so about a total of an hour and a half. They've started to break down, like you can see they've started to mash themselves. And when you get to this point, you know you've cooked them enough. Most recipes say you only need to cook the chickpeas until you can crush them in your hands, but taking them to this stage will always give you a creamier result. There's still a bit of liquid left in here. We want to dry this mixture out a bit because it will end up blending better and it's not going to be diluted. So I'm just going to leave it uncovered now, keep it on the same heat, and it will evaporate a bit more moisture. I'll check back in about 10 minutes and it should be good to go. Okay, so now we've got rid of most of the water. This is kind of what we're left with. It's literally just a paste of cooked chickpeas that have already started to break down. Now this is pretty much what we did in our original hummus recipe. We've just got to let them cool down before we can blend them. So I've got a metal tray and I'm just going to tip these out. If you make a lot of hummus, it's at this point where you can kind of bulk prep things. So you can cook a lot of chickpeas and then just freeze them once they get to this form. Just going to spread it out a bit. That way, a lot of the heat can get out of it pretty quick. Gonna chuck this in the fridge for about half an hour or so, and then we'll come back here and we'll add all the ingredients necessary to turn it into hummus. So our chickpeas have had plenty of time to cool down, and to break them down nice and small, I'm going to use my trusty Magimix food processor. If you don't have a food processor, you can use a high-speed blender if you have one. However, with chickpeas and thick things like that, it tends to put a lot of strain on the machine, so a food processor is a better option. Now, the benefit of putting your chickpeas onto a tray like this and putting them in the fridge is that if you don't want to make all of the hummus right away, you can just take these blocks of hummus that form like that and stick them in your freezer, and then you can make fresh hummus whenever you desire. The way we're going to mix the ingredients into the hummus is going to occur in several stages, and in each stage you'll find that the food processor doesn't evenly mix everything in, and so you'll need to pause quite often in every stage and give it a good mix to make sure everything is evenly combined. This first stage is purely just the chickpeas, and let it run for a few minutes to break them down, roughly about 5 minutes. Okay, like I said, you're going to stop and scrape several times. You want them really fine, make sure there's no bits in there. We've been about 5 minutes now, and at this stage we have ground the chickpeas. So we've got a fluffy paste of chickpeas, and you need to get to this point before you add the other ingredients, because that will just set the hummus up to have a really nice mouthfeel and texture. Now, up until this point, this recipe is identical to the one we put out a few years ago that everyone really loved. But we kept trying to understand, how is it that restaurants make their hummus extra smooth? And there's a couple of things they do different. The first thing is that they use vegetable oil when they're making their hummus. Now, the vegetable oil does a couple of things. Firstly, it makes the hummus a lot smoother. It gives it a fluffier and silkier mouthfeel. This isn't a traditional ingredient though in regular hummus, so if you want the most traditional recipes, you're not going to use the vegetable oil. We've got to stream it in while the machine is running. And you can already see that it's a lot lighter in color, but of course you're going to have to do, like I said, pause and mix it down. It's so much more fluffy than it was a few moments ago. The second thing that restaurants do to make their hummus extra smooth is that they use a ton more tahini. This is about double the amount we have in our usual recipe. Now, it's important that the tahini you use has a nice and light color. Tahini can go from a very light beige color all the way up to a dark brown. The darker the tahini, the more bitter it is. Now, this is the ingredient that will make your blender struggle if you're not using a food processor. Now, I'm sure you can hear the food processor was struggling with that. That's a lot of tahini, and the mixture is so thick now. Hummus wouldn't taste the same without lemon juice, so it's very important that you use nice, freshly squeezed lemon juice. Sometimes lemons aren't that acidic though, and you don't want to add too much lemon juice, otherwise the hummus is going to thin out. So in that case, you'd want to add some citric acid. Good amount of lemon, and then, of course, some salt to season. Now, after adding the lemon, it has thinned out quite nicely again. It's a nice texture, but we're still not done. And now for the final ingredient, and it is a bunch of ice. Now the ice is going to do a few things. Firstly, because of all the mixing, the blades have introduced a lot of heat into the hummus, and so this is actually a bit looser than it would be when it's chilled down to room temperature. The other thing is the ice adds water and basically lightens the color of the hummus. It helps make it fluffier, it gives it that silky smooth feel. The amount that you're going to end up adding though is going to differ, so you very much add a few pieces and then kind of add more to get it to the texture that you want. And you want to do that while the machine is running. Now that looks a lot more like what I'd expect. So it does seem quite loose. You can see it's just going to spill off the spoon, but that is normal because this mixture is quite warm. And you can leave this running for as long as you want now to get it to the texture that you want. You can thin it out more, you can thicken it. If you find it gets a bit too runny, you can add some extra tahini. All right, that looks absolutely done, and the mixture is so smooth. Now, it is going to be a bit runny, which is normal because it is warm. So I'm going to put this into a container transfer it into the fridge, and then show you what the final texture looks like once it has cooled down to room temperature. This has been in the fridge since yesterday. It has chilled down nice and cool now. It doesn't really need to spend much time in the fridge, if any at all, and it will firm up like this. This firm texture is going to make it so easy for us to get one of those classic hummus swirls. So let me plate it up and show you how to do that. Before you start plating the hummus, you're going to want to give it a good mix, because what you'll have is a lot of air bubbles that got trapped in when it was being blended. Just grab a couple of big dollops of hummus onto your plate. And then once you've got that, you will swirl around the outside of the hummus, rotating using the inside of your spoon to kind of smooth the edges. And you can use the back of the spoon as well if you want. Now, once you've got it nice and flat on the outside, you want to, your spoon, bounce it up and down a few times in the middle. That'll help to spread it, go around, do that a few times around, and then take your spoon, put it in the middle, aimed a bit downwards, and rotate the plate as you are swirling it outwards. And that is how you make a hummus swirl. Now you're just simply going to add some of your favorite olive oil right to the middle. Good healthy amount. And a few cooked chickpeas as a garnish. And that is how you make a restaurant quality hummus right at home. It's got the same texture, a very similar flavor, and I'm betting that this is going to be better than anything you can buy from the store. Couldn't find a blindfold, so this will have to do, but Selma's going to feed me one of each piece, and I'm going to try and figure out which one is which.
Not yet.
Okay, I think the first one is our old hummus recipe. The second one was really creamy, really smooth, really nice. And I thought that was the Imam Sharif, the restaurant one. But then the third one was ever so slightly smoother. So I'm guessing it was our one, our old one, our new one, then the restaurant one.
You guessed right.
There you have it. It is as close as you can get. So if, like me, you are sick of spending a lot of money on restaurants' hummus, well, you can make your own restaurant hummus at home, and it is practically the same. The texture, the flavor, everything is just absolutely fantastic. This one's just ever so slightly silkier, but without an industrial food processor.